This video is brought to you by the University Writing Center, a unit of the Department of Rhetoric and Writing at the University of Texas at Austin. You can contact us at uwc.utexas.edu.
Hello and welcome. My name is Michael Dale, and I'm going to be giving a presentation on peer review as put together by the UWC Grad Services. So let's get started. When coming into the process of peer review, one of the most important aspects is communicating clear expectations. Whether you're a writer or a reader, you want to know exactly what your job is and what the other person is expecting. Okay, and as a reader, there are a few strategies that we recommend here at the Writing Center and we've found to be very helpful. I'm going to outline the strategies quickly right now, and then we're going to get into them in more detail. So first, distinguish between local and global concerns. Be positive and receptive. Be context-sensitive, focused, and solution-driven. Remember the power of narrating your experience as a reader. And always remember to comment on the writing, not the writer. So let's get into the details of these. First, we have local versus global concerns. Knowing what to prioritize is very important. If you're the reader, you want to ask the writer what they want to focus on. So they want to focus on more specific local concerns, or do they want to step back and look at the broader picture? Some local concerns are style, syntax, typos, formatting, line edits, and that sort of thing. Global concerns are, have more to do with the structure of the paper, paragraphing, transitions, the argument, the thesis, broader issues. And yeah, you want to communicate with the writer about what sort of focus you want to take, or ask them what sort of focus they want to take, and this will depend, right? So if the assignment's due the next day, then maybe you don't have time to look at global concerns, and that's okay. Then again, if the writer still has a couple weeks before they need to turn it in, global and local concerns can be on the table. But again, always ask what the writer has in mind. Next, always be positive and receptive. So when working with peers, always try to remember that you're here to support and encourage each other. So when you're offering feedback, try to offer compliments along with your feedback. Tell them what's going well with the project. Obviously you don't want to just say, hey, your project's fantastic and there are no issues. People, writers, they want some sort of criticism, they want some sort of feedback and ways that they can improve their writing, but try to be as supportive and constructive as possible. And when receiving feedback, it's important to remember that your reader is just giving you options, right? So it's your paper. You can decide what to do with your paper. You can say no to their options, but always be nice about it. Be respectful about it. So here's a quote that we have when receiving feedback. So thanks for taking the time to read this. I appreciate your suggestions to expand my discussion on page 5 through 7. I don't think I'll have room for that material in this conference talk, but your comments will be a big help when I turn this piece into an article. So you're deciding not to take the reader's feedback, and that's okay, but you're stating this in a constructive, respectful manner. Third is being context-sensitive, focused, and solution-driven. Okay, so as we all know, as graduate students and faculty members, sharing writing and asking for feedback is anxiety-producing. The writing process in academia is very anxiety-producing. So try to help them make concrete assessments and specific changes with their particular writing context. So here's the kind of information that should be shared between the writer and reader. Here's some good examples of expectations being set and about what type of information will be discussed. So, for example, time frame. When does this material need to be finished? Again, it's going to be important if it needs to be turned in tomorrow versus they still have a couple weeks or even a couple months. discussing the purpose of the project, the intended audience. So is this meant for a conference talk? Is this meant to be a journal article? Is the audience your committee members, and what sort of work are they looking for? So it'll depend on audience. Of course, talking about which sections to focus on. If you as the writer want to focus on just a few sections, make that clear to your reader. And always any sort of specific questions, that's perfectly fine. If you want to know, like, if the citation style is right, or if you think if you're being too casual, or if it's okay to use I. Of course, these norms will differ across disciplines, so that's something to keep in mind when giving and receiving feedback with people from different disciplines. But it's always good to hear people's input on these issues. Next, narrate your experience as a reader. So when you're reading a paper or a chapter, some people think that they need to be very diagnostic and directive. You should change this, you should revise these sentences in this way, and then maybe even putting some sentences together, like the reader putting some sentences together to try to fix a paragraph. But sometimes this type of very directive feedback is not all that helpful. So as a reader, try not to be so diagnostic and directive, and more ask yourself questions as you go along, and mark those questions down, and then ask those questions to the writer. So for example, when did you feel interested? When did you feel confused as the reader? When did you want to read more about a specific idea? And again, write these questions down and ask the writer about them. So and sort of frame your feedback in this slightly non-directive manner. So instead of saying this section needs to be revised in X, Y, and Z ways, you could say, I got confused in this section when you said this. What did you mean? Or when you talked about this piece of evidence, I wondered X. So it sort of with this approach, you're taking a more open-ended approach, and you're enabling the writer sort of to give you feedback on how they can fix the issues. And ultimately, it is their paper, so this type of narration is usually the most helpful. Fifth, very important, comment on the writing, not the writer. So consider the difference between these two sentences. This concluding sentence doesn't seem to match the paragraph's opening topic sentence. So that's talking about the writing, it's talking about sentences in the paragraph, versus you've concluded the paragraph very differently than you opened it. See, in the second example, you seem to be talking directly to the writer, and the writer might take this feedback more personally, and it's not necessarily as constructive as just focusing on the writing itself and talking about the issues in the writing. This is something that a lot of us can forget to do, especially when we're giving feedback in fields that we're excited about or that we know that we're experts in. But it's always important to comment on the writing and not the writer. Now, as the writer, we've talked about being the writer and the reader throughout this, but we've focused a lot on the reader strategies. But there are some good strategies to go into to use as a writer. So, for example, always listen first and respond second. So when you're getting feedback on your writing, a lot of times we have this inclination to defend our writing and talk about it because we know a lot about what we're writing about. We're experts in these fields, so sometimes we get carried away with talking about it and defending it against readers. But always try to listen to your reader first. Listen to the feedback. And then respond. And when you do listen, this goes to the second point, listen actively. Again, it's sometimes hard to hear feedback and criticism on your own work, but we're all just trying to help each other out and improve our writing as much as possible. So listen actively, listen to the feedback, write it down, plan for next steps. Again, you don't have to take all the feedback that you receive. It is your paper, but always try to listen actively. Again, be respectful and generous. This is very important. We talked a bit about that. But it makes for a great atmosphere and ultimately the most sort of fruitful conversations. Again, goes back to point 2, but point 4 is being strategic. Getting the most out of your feedback means being receptive. Write the feedback down, receive it well. You don't have to take it, but at least consider it. And finally, step into your audience's shoes. So when you're hearing from a reader, you're hearing from an audience. They may not be from your field, but they are a peer in some ways. So they're important to consider. And when you're listening to their feedback, always remember this. So just don't forget your audience. And that's the presentation. So thank you for listening. Again, this is brought to you by the UWC Grad Services. It can be found at uwc.utexas.edu/grad. You can send us an email at uwcgradservices@utexas.edu. And I hope you enjoyed the presentation.